I wore a Whoop, Garmin and Oura Ring in this year's Sydney Marathon, and in this video I thought it might be interesting to see what exertion looks like when running the marathon and test the data and accuracy of each device. Let's dive in. So initially I thought it'd be really cool to show you how recovered I was and how much sleep I got before the race. But for those who watched my marathon video, you know that I didn't get any sleep. So for my Whoop, unfortunately there's no data for my sleep performance. And as a result, I have no data for my recovery as well. If we have a look at Oura, however, it says that I got 4 hours of sleep, which is unfortunately incorrect. There's a lot of movement and I was definitely trying to get some sleep, so staying really still and relaxing, and this is probably why it's inaccurate in the data. For those who are running their first marathon, it's very normal to struggle to fall asleep and you're going to be waking up early, so your sleep's not going to be great. However, many studies show that it's actually the night before that's important. So if you get a good night's sleep then you'll be all right. And I think knowing this, I was definitely a lot more relaxed going into this year's marathon. Now let's just go through some of the data during the race. So Whoop actually has a really cool feature where you can see the activity on your phone and it updates your data live. And I thought it might have been cool to screenshot some of the data periodically, which is probably why my phone died halfway during the race. The Whoop strain data works on a proprietary scale from 0 to 21. The closer you are to 21, the harder you are working. At marathon day, I started running at 6:16. 12 minutes in, I'm at around 2 and a bit Ks and I'm at a 7.4 strain. Heart rate's around 156. We can compare this to the Garmin data where I'm hovering around a 5:45 to around 5:50 pace and my heart rate's around 162, a bit higher than I'd like. 27 minutes in and it's around the 5K mark. I'm feeling fine. My heart rate is lowered, so settling into a comfortable pace now. My activity strain's gone up to 11.2, heart rate's still at 148. Looking at the Garmin data, my pace is varying quite a lot from 5:07 to 6-minute paces, but my heart rate's around 160. Looking at 57 minutes into the race, I've increased to 14.9 strain. My heart rate's still averaging at around 151, which is quite good. So this is quite similar to my heart rate on my Garmin. And at this point, I'm around a 540 pace. Was really feeling good and staying steady. Fast forwarding to around halfway, 2 hours in, my activity strain is at 18.7 and my average heart rate is still stable at 152. So if you compare that to the Garmin data, you're around the 22 kilometer mark. And my pace is around 530 with a heart rate around 562. Was feeling a bit tired here, but I still had juice in the legs and was maintaining a conservative pace. Unfortunately for the 30K mark, my phone had died at this point. However, if we look at the Garmin data, I'm going at around a 517 pace with my heart rate hovering from 155 to 160. Fast forward to the last few kilometers, being conservative had paid off and I was able to push much harder. If I have a look at my final Whoop activity, my activity strain peaked out at 20.6. So this is probably comparable to where I was in the last few kilometers of the race. If we have a look at the Garmin, I'm going at around a 410 kilometer pace and my heart rate's spiking up to around 180. And at this point I was absolutely just flying, which was really cool. Now let's compare the overall activity data from each device. Let's go ahead and look at the pace and distance data first. So with my Oura Ring, it says that I ran for 29.1 kilometers at an average pace of 8 minutes, which is completely wrong. So I wouldn't be trusting that data there. My Whoop data isn't that much better. It says that I ran 33.2 kilometers at a 6:52 pace, so also very inaccurate. With any activity data, I'd most definitely rely on my Garmin. And as you can see here, I ran 42.43 kilometers at a 5:22 kilometer pace. Next, if we have a look at the average heart rate for my Oura Ring, it's 161. My Whoop is 152, so a big disparity there. And my Garmin says 158, so right in between. I'd probably trust the Garmin data the most, and it's also in the middle in between the two, so it makes sense. Next, if we look at heart rate zones, for my Oura Ring, I spent around 3 hours and 35 minutes in there, 8 minutes in zone 5, 7 minutes in zone 3. But honestly, the data here looks very limited. Comparing that to the Whoop, the data for the heart rate zones is way more robust, so you can see exactly which zone you were at a specific point in your activity. I was running in zone 5 near the end for 1% of my race. I spent 80% of my race in zone 4 and 20% of my race in zone 3. If we have a look at my Garmin data, you can see that I spent 5 minutes or 2% in zone 5, 3 hours and 15 minutes or 85% in zone 4, and 26 minutes or 11% in zone 3. It also has a really cool map that shows your heart rate zones at a specific point in the race. As you can see, I started relatively easy and I was able to push really hard at the end. So just looking at some additional data for my Oura Ring, it says I burnt 2,307 calories. My Whoop, 2,948 calories. And for my Garmin, 3,043. So I just noticed this, but for my data in my Oura Ring, it actually finished when my phone died, which is a bit strange because it actually recorded the whole activity here. So this definitely explains why a lot of the data is off, and so take everything with a grain of salt here. Looking at my Whoop, it seems like a similar thing happened, which is a bit strange because I did finish my race at 10:04. So it's got all the data there, but for some reason the route is completely off. This definitely explains why the distance and pace is off, but I assume the calories and average heart rate and all that is still accurate in this data. Looking at some of the data for the next day, I had an alright sleep that night at 6 hours and 42 minutes with my Oura. With my Whoop, it's similar to my Oura with 6 hours and 32 minutes. And with my recovery, it says that I'm at a 53% for that day. So yeah, I hope you found this video a bit interesting. I've left the link to the activity in the description, so go ahead and check that out. Feel free to leave any comments or questions below, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.